and I aim to go through as many of them as I can through Kickstarter. We spent a considerable amount of time working with your counterparts in Japan to enable the new APIs directly to the embedded interface. So some of the things that we're able to do now is to look into your new features for the full copy control, so we can now promote that onto the Nuance screens. And that also extends to scanning and fax, as well as global scan. So we're now able to move forward with later APIs that's provided within the platform to deliver a better user customer experience by being able to access those direct features directly from the Nuance screens. So hopefully now you can see the welcome screen on the slide. So some of the improvements that we've made here is we've added, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, regarding quick shortcuts. We now have a quick shortcut for copy. So this will take you to the full copy mode now, not the quick copy mode as it was previously. Some other minor things that we've enabled here is that the Nuance logo, the big white Nuance logo in the centre of the screen, and the white image of the card reader being held by the hand, these can all be customised, and we'll be showing you how that can be done in a later session, so in this session. And in addition to that, the message where we're showing at the moment says touch screen to start, that message can also be changed up to 60 characters, so you can put your own instructional or whatever message you would want to put in directly from the customer experience. So what we've in effect done here is we've heard your request for this, because I know there's been some quite a few requests to be able to change this. So this has now been built into this particular release through the new embedded interface and the associated DRS, which will handle the configuration. Just moving on to the next screen, so we're just going to click onto the login screen. I'm going to log in. So we're just going to log in as a standard user. And one change that we've made there now is that you'll see that we go straight to the launcher screen, and with the launcher screen you'll now also see those copy, fax and scan features, as well as when it pops up we'll be able to see global scan is also I thought global scan was on the screen. But global scanner would also be able to be shown on the screen directly. Notice obviously we have multiple workflows on the screen, and we could also, if we had more, which I think we have an additional screen, we could swipe to the additional launcher screen to show multiple workflows if you had more of the 12 that were allocated. So whilst we're here, if we go to the Follow You printing screen, to show you some of the minor improvements that have been made here, we've taken an opportunity to clean up this screen slightly. So generally it's much the same as it was for PCC version 5, but we've made a change on the Force Mono button to make it a toggle button as opposed to a push button, which we generally found feedback was that it was a confusing button. And we've also reorganised the secondary toolbar, the brown toolbar, where we now have the balance shown as well as the copy increase as well as the Force Mono. As before, we've tried to minimise Follow You screen, so some of the actual actions that you require will be under the hamburger menu in the top right-hand corner. So when we select that, you'll see the select all, delete, refresh your print and save. This Follow You printing screen is actually configured for Equitrack, but if this was configured for Output Manager, we've also now introduced the print preferences, so you'll be able to change the Output Manager print preferences at time of release. I haven't got an Output Manager screen to show you, but the major differences here is in the bottom right-hand corner where you can see the document attributes, such as one page, one document colour. Here you'll see a Change Settings button. If you were to press that Change Settings button, you'll be able to access any of the Output Manager print preferences that the system administrator is allowed to be changed. So with that, we're going to go back to the launcher screen, and we're going to go to the Scan to Me to show you the scanning screens. So here there's not a huge amount of change from what you would be familiar with PCC version 5. We're still utilising the Scan GUI service, which has been updated for the latest changes from UK Japan. If we click on the change button bit, we can go to look at the Scan GUI service. And these will be the settings that you'll be able to change, as well as a preview if configured, which we haven't actually got shown here, but where we're showing the mouse at the moment, you would actually be able to do a document preview as well. So we go back to the launcher, and if maybe we drop out to the full copy feature from the launcher. So if you remember with PCC version 5, we were only able to go to the quick copy feature. Now we're able to drop out to the full copy feature, and it also extends to both scan and towards print. And we'll just wait for the machine to catch up. This is quick copy. We go back and then we can go to the full copy. It's good to show both. So a demonstration of the fact that you can now access both quick and or full copy. So we can now pop, if we maybe log out and you can show the server status screen. So what I'm going to do now is to show you a new screen that we built in. And this is, again, from a request from the field, where we put some type of notifications that the back-end system may have an offline condition. So with the PCC4 module, if you remember that on Java, we had the red traffic light that was on the front screen. We weren't able to reproduce that within the Android or the SAP interface. So what we've done within this release, under the hamburger menu, we click on that, you'll now see a server status screen. When we click on the server status screen, you'll see the connected servers, in this case EchoTrack. But if it was also connected to AutoStore, you'll also see the AutoStore server, the current online status, whether it be online connecting or offline, as well as the server address being attributed either to the IP address and or the host name. So the additional thing with this status screen is the user can access it via the hamburger menu, but if the device detects an offline condition with the EchoTrack AutoStore App Manager servers, it will also automatically pop up the screen dynamically. So the user will be able to see straight away that there is some type of offline condition that they should pay attention to. So we close that in. And if we, one final thing just to show you on the interface, then we go and release a print job. We've taken the time to reorganize the user notifications. So if you're familiar with PCC version 5, in the top blue bar, when there was a user would log on with their card, it would say card data red and it would pop up a message on the screen. When you release the print job, it would pop up a message to say that you've released a print job. What we've done now is to try to minimize the screens popping up all the time. We're only now going to pop up error alerts. Error statuses, we're just going to actually log the error. We're going to put a small icon on the screen just to say to the user that there's something there that they may want to pay attention to, but it's not going to pop up the error alert directly onto the screen. So if we release the print job, you'll see now that you see the eye has come up just by the hamburger menu. If we hover over the eye, it will now say that this print job has been released. But the major difference here, it didn't overtake the screen to say to the user that the job has been released. The user will generally know that because obviously the print job will start printing. So we've taken a bit of time to recategorize the error alerts from status alerts to make sure they're not too intrusive to the user. And with that, I think I've probably covered through the various different screens. So I'll pass back to Jan and Vince to take you through the next stage of the presentation. Thank you.
Guys, there's quite a lot of chat coming through. If we could maybe answer some of those while they're relevant.
All questions will be answered at the end of the second session. Today's session is focusing on presenting the PCC and a simple installation. Tomorrow, as said, we will show how to upgrade, address issues, and answer questions.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, this is the break time, in fact. We will give you a small break of 10 minutes. See you in a jiff. Thank you.
I think there's maybe some merit for us to actually go over. There's a lot of people that join late onto that call.
I would say that because otherwise we're going to end up with quite a build up. Do we know what the questions are?
Yeah,
can
they're in the
copy-paste.
chat. They're in the chat bit.
We need to.
And I think some of those questions can actually be answered before we go into maybe the demos, because a lot of them are the same questions that they're asking time and time again.
I would recommend that we answer some of those as we go through.
So, yeah, if you copy and paste those into a Word document and then flash them up.
Do you you want me to field the questions?
A copy paste.
If you want, I'll field these questions and then we'll move on. So the problem will be we can end up with quite a stack of questions. So
But I'm worried that it yeah.
well, we've got a break now, so we can just do this.
The break took place rather quickly. We're only 26 minutes into the presentation. So a 10-minute break, 20 minutes.
Over that, what we do is we leave the Q&A right to the end.
Yeah.
We do
Two sessions, one today, one tomorrow. Okay. Don't build them all up. Plus, some people have today, one
I can make a message to everybody.
No, just leave it. When we get back,
Okay.
Just say that in the Q&A, we'll actually leave it to the end of today's session.
We can move pretty fast.
What I'll do is I'll
Oh, we could have made only a 5-minute break.
So, version 4 copy, it's only the 4 copies of classic. No, I don't need classic apps. So, create non-existing folders on the first game. Also, see the cards. Thanks for this. It takes time to print your
Gosh, the timing was off for the break.
to what screen to access to the
Yeah. But Japanese.
60 characters.
But Japanese.
It's just limited to 60.
Just like that.
Yeah. Just do it. Just going to exit out of this. We change the screen. Change the screen. This, I'm not sure I've actually got the correct version of the presentation.
Okay, in less than 2 minutes we will start over.
Some of those questions you made, I just had a quick read through them. Some of them are quite relevant to now. So some of them were about icons that were on the screen. So perhaps it's a better idea that we cover those now.
Yeah, since we've been going very fast.
The e-copy ones, there's too much going on.
I will unlock and tell that we will have a Q&A and session at the end of the interface of what is, since we are.
Yeah, so we should just say this.
Okay, let's ready to be ready to resume.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We will resume shortly. Since we received many questions and we are running ahead on schedule, we choose to propose you a Q&A session at the end of this session, this WebEx. So please bear with us, send your question by the chat system of WebEx, and we will address them at the end of today's session. Thank you. Let's resume.
Hello everybody, this is Vincent Batchelor here. I work in the European Technology Centre as one of the technical consultants. I look after EquiTrack with respect to global accounts and some national major accounts deals. So it's fallen to me today to actually sort of review the PCC 5.1 installation. Now, a lot of you, I imagine the vast majority of people are actually familiar with PCC 5, and PCC 5.1 in terms of a method follows very similar lines, but there are some key differences which I'll point out on the way. I'll be honest with you as well up front, I was not a PCC 5 believer, but since working with PCC 5.1, I've actually found that it's a much better product, not just in terms of function, but also in terms of its reliability. So anyway, any questions, post them into the chat, and we'll go through the questions list right at the end. I'll also point out that this this part of the presentation, I'm using some live demonstration, but I will put my hand up and say that I'm also going to be using some video footage as well. The reason for that is primarily to speed things up a bit. So hopefully you won't mind that I'm going to be switching between some actual tools on screen and then switching out to a video maybe to show a particular part. Right, let's get started. So in this section, we're going to have a quick look at checklist and best practice, DRS configuration, device registration service, PCC installation, and PCC configuration. Okay, before I even start going on to this, I would like to say that all of this information is actually in the guides that are provided with the product. I'm not taking anything out of thin air. It's all documented. It's all come from those documents. And the reason I've done that is basically to indicate that there is quite a lot of information available with the product itself. Okay, I didn't mean to move that on, so I'll go back. So first thing you have to be aware of is that PCC 5.1 is also the equivalent of Universal Client 1.1, and the current build version is 1.30.184. Now, there is a minimum device firmware level, but it's always going to be preferred, and that's why I'm going to say it here. It's always preferred that we use the latest version of device firmware on the machine. So from a SOP panel point of view, that's currently 1.30, and obviously you'll need the accompanying device firmware with it as well. In terms of the support under EquiTrack, you're looking at support from EquiTrack Office or Express 5.6 and 5.7, or later, but with the relevant hotfixes. You must fit the hotfixes. From an AutoStore point of view, it will be AutoStore 7 SP5 or later, and for Output Manager, it's Output Manager 4 SP2 or later. But I will return back once again to emphasise that with EquiTrack Office and Express, you must fit the hotfixes required by PCC. Okay, The other thing on here is just looking through a checklist and going through versioning information. So we've got there the base requirements. I know I've already said that whilst that's a base requirement, we would always prefer that you load up the latest version, which is currently 1.30. Also, and this probably requires you to have a little bit of knowledge of the interface, which we'll come on to, but it's important to note that when updating device firmware, it is actually recommended you do a full action install DRS if you've had to replace quite a lot of firmware. And that is in order that any SP modes that were set are still there. In terms of other versioning information with associated software, PCC 5.1 also supports other, or interworking with other Rico embedded applications using AAA, but that uses version 2.02. We currently use RxOP. For those of you who don't know what RxOP is, it's a remote execution operation library that allows us to build applications to deploy firmware and panel applications. It's also used extensively within our own device management products. We also support Scan GUI service, which is how the PCC now talks to the scan components on the machine. And within that, we have two distinct types. We've got the Smart Scan EX 1.06, which effectively is used for every SOP G2 device, with the exception of the 306 and 406. Now, the 306 and 406, because of the limitations they have around the scanner, they effectively it's a much reduced scan capability. We can only use the Simple Scan EX, currently at version 1.02, on those devices. When you come, as you're probably already aware, when you use version 5, or when you're using DRS to install PCC version 5, you had a drop down there where you had to select whether or not it was an NPC 306, 406, or other. Okay, that hasn't changed. The naming's changed slightly, but in terms of the operation, that hasn't changed. And that's one of the settings that determines which version of the Scan GUI you use. Okay, a handy little table that comes in the documentation. And this is basically, it's also quite important. So this is showing all the DRS versions on the far left and your PCC 5 versions on the right-hand side. And I'll highlight straight away that for PCC 5.1, you need to have DRS 7.12 or later fitted. Now, you can only deploy PCC 5.1 from 7.12. However, you can do upgrades for earlier versions of PCC 5, that's PCC 5 build 1.14525 and build 1.14342. You can upgrade those from within DRS 7.12. So I know that there was some thought earlier on about the possibility of having to uninstall first and then reinstall. So you have to uninstall in the original version of DRS and then have to reinstall using the new version. So that pain has now been taken away. So if you've got existing PCC 5 customers out there, you can actually do the upgrade all from within DRS 7.12. Looking at the other versions of DRS, the main thing I want to point out here is for PCC 5.1, anything less than 7.12 does not support PCC 5.1, and it will not support PCC 5.1. So that's the main thing you need to take away from this slide. Okay, other notes, and I'll be honest with you, I took these out of the documentation. Once again, it's to show that this information does actually exist in the documentation. So one of the things that is recommended when you install PCC 5.1 is to actually consider purging the address book. Now, you should be able to do this from within our device management tool, Streamline and X, or our web image monitor. Is purge the address book on the MFP. And this is really so that you can realise some login performance improvements that have been made in PCC 5.1. Second point, avoid adding quick shortcuts to the launcher screen. Apologise for spelling a launcher. To launch a container, to avoid navigation loops, so spell checks had its way. So it's navigation loops that's supposed to be. So it would be possible, or it could be possible, to have shortcuts which point to each other, and you end up in a bit of a navigation. So to avoid that, shortcuts in the launcher container. As already mentioned, after firmware updates, full action install is recommended to ensure that SP modes remain set. When upgrading from version 5 to version 5.1, you would do this using a full install option. And I'll explain more about that when we actually look at the DRS interface. When upgrading from DRS 7.x to DRS 7.12, you need to use a database update tool. Now, the database update tool comes as part of the package, so when you download DRS 7.12 and you get your self-extracting archive, you should find when you extract it, you end up with the installer for DRS 7.12 and also something called a database update tool. There is instructions in the manual and documentation how to do this. I will actually be going over this or reviewing this tomorrow morning. But effectively, the database update tool needs to be run after the application upgrade, but preferably before the DRS service has started. In fact, it needs to be run before the DRS service starts because it locks the database. One other thing, which is kind of in the documentation, but probably not as obvious, is TLS. Now, I will be looking at this. I'll spend 5 minutes on this when we go through the interface. We now have some additional security features, and I think this is going to be mentioned in another slide, so I won't dwell too much here. But you have some additional security features around what they call DCE pinning and DRS pinning, which is where effectively you limit the communication between PCC and particular servers. Now, when you're doing some of this, not so much the DRS pinning, but when you're doing some of the communication, and if you've enabled TLS within the DRS, you need to make sure you've installed certificates on the devices and that they're able to run TLS as well. Otherwise, you'll get a failure. Conversely, if you're not using TLS on DRS, but you've set the device up, you've got to be careful how you've done it because you can end up with some communication errors there. And I mean, nothing bad happens, just that it doesn't install. And of course, that's what you don't want. So we'll have a quick look at those anyway. My main point here is that be consistent. If you're going to use TLS, make sure you've made the settings all the way through. If you're not, make sure it's consistent all the way through as well. Okay, so that brings us nicely, neatly, onto a live session. And the following demonstration will look at DRS. It's mainly going to be around DRS. So we'll look at adding files, we're going to look at application devices. I'm not going to do hundreds of them, I'll just go through one sample on each. We'll look at the available installation actions. I'll go through the list there. It's actually quite a list, but in fact, in reality, we probably only need 1 or 2 items on that list ever. We'll look at adding custom assets, so this includes custom images and deploying those images, custom welcome text, and custom workflow buttons. And I say I'll be using a mixture of hands-on now and video. Really, the whole idea behind that is to try and shortcut some of the time. And once again, I know that people out there are probably thinking time. Yes, it does take time to install PCC. You're installing a complex application onto one of our devices. It has to go through a number of steps in order to achieve that. And currently, with the way our platform is built, we do require to execute reboots, multiple reboots at various points. So This all slows the process down, but currently it's the way the system has to work in order to be successful. Okay, so what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to exit out the presentation, and all things being considered, hopefully everything's still standing behind it. Right, so here's our device registration service. I'm not going to go through starting the program up and bring it up. I guess you guys have already seen that. What I might do though is I might just minimize that for a minute whilst I do this. Just get rid of that. Okay, so this is the DOS, Device Registration System Configuration tool, okay, which is installed once you install the service. For those of you who probably remember, there's a particular service that, oops, pardon, use my mouse. There's a particular service that gets installed when you install DRS, which in fact, I don't know why we do at all. It's in typos, great thing, beg your pardon. I'm determined to get there now. So I'll just review the services before I go on, but effectively what we've got in the box here is mirroring the status of the service as installed under Windows. So we scroll down, we get to our classic EQ or EchoTrack services. What you have to remember is DRS is a multi-purpose tool. It's used not just with EchoTrack, it's used with other Nuance applications as well. So when we come down here, what we see is that we have another service called the Nuance Device Registration Service. So really, this should reflect what's going on with the service and operates directly with the service control panel there. We can see our service ports, and probably the one you probably need to know most is going to be port 9000, which is the client port that you're accessing on. We can see our ACL is currently set to everyone. I don't know if anyone really actually has changed that. Maybe there is, but I've not come across it so far. We'll go to administration first. Okay, I'll be coming back to this. This is where you can enable tracing by default. Web service logging is actually off, so I've turned it on here. And you obviously have to set a log folder. It will default to a log folder, which is within the install application path. And it's quite good. There's one or two particular logs which are actually very good for source information. Let's say we'll look at that a bit tomorrow. Middle tab, which I left, say last but not least, concerns TLS. So by default, TLS is not enabled. Should not be. I believe it's not enabled. I must admit, I'm struggling there. But it's not enabled. If you enable TLS for the web client, this means that when you access the DRS front page, you'll need to use HTTPS to connect. If you enable on the web service, this controls the communication with the device. In this case, I'm using self-signed certificates, so you can choose certificate, you can create new self-signed, or once again, you need to check the documentation. You can actually use a CA certified certificate should you need. Okay, so coming back to the actual tool itself, you're probably looking and thinking, well, not much has changed, and in that respect, probably not. It looks very similar, but as we will come on, we'll see there's now some extra features which are creeping in. We've still got the same aspect that we need to add files, and in fact, I'll be covering some of this later. I'm going to remove some items just to So I'll just show you that you use this tab to move your items. Okay, I'll come back to that. You can also upload items. So this is where you, it's the same as before, where you can upload your OXOP files. I always start with the XML file, and there's a reason for that. When you upload the files now, you'll notice that they're grouped. So anything which is referenced by the XML file here is then held in the same group. So we've got our actual PCC auth on auth files, plus we've got our scan GUI files. So because they're now referenced in the XML file, they're held inside. Some of you may have noticed that there's two additional ones. Okay, these come with the product, so when you install DRS, those two packages will actually be there by default. You can delete them, probably not a smart thing to do at the moment because they're not posted anywhere, so you end up having to reinstall DRS in order to get the files back. But these are all parts and parcel of some of the extended functionality that we have within the product. Okay, once again, applications. I've got an application created here, so I'm just going to open that up and we can have a look. So I've called it NUC 1.1, you can call it PCC5, you can call it whatever you want. Interesting point this time is we now have the ability to actually turn off the capture component completely, whereas before the box was always there, so and it always populated the port with 3350 or whatever it was. And you always found that you were safer to delete the port, because I know with earlier versions of PCC5 you could have some particular issues if the port was left in with no server. We've still got our print management selection, so either Output Manager or EchoTrack, not both. And within EchoTrack you have to put in your DCE server or servers. Now, one of the things I was talking about with regards to TLS, if you start configuring TLS or not using TLS, you can affect the way in which this works. Now, this is something which is new. This wasn't there with the previous versions of DRS, and it's new with DRS 7.12, and the operation is new with PCC 5.1, which is one of the reasons why you have this thing that you can't use earlier versions. So the operation of PCC 5.1 changed slightly in that once the product's installed and some configurations have been passed down, what DRS actually does is it tells the device to come and get its configuration. The device will then come back in on this URL and it will download the rest of its configuration. So it's things like custom assets, custom text, etc. If you've misconfigured TLS, this will fail, and you'll get a particular, I think it's a 601 error. You'll get come up in the URL. So one of the first things you do is you come in and check whether or not you should be using TLS or non-TLS, or secure sockets, non-secure sockets, however you want to put it. So that's one thing to watch out for. We still have an authentication box. This is when you use auth on, auth off scenarios where you may be using something like common access card. I was trying to avoid using the acronym, but so if you're using a common access card, which is where we then put an interface on which logs you in. So if anyone who doesn't know, common access card is an application which is available via RICO US. They use it predominantly over there for government organisations, and they use smart cards. So it's when they're signing in with smart cards. So common access card actually supports a single sign-on through the AAA libraries. But in order for it to work, you need to make sure that PCC is installed as a listener, not a provider. So by turning authentication to false, in this case, that would actually affect that. So anyway, I'm happy with this. I hope you are, and I'm going back. Devices. So once again, this is very similar to PCC5. You can create groups device groups. Come up here, set it as device group. So a device group basically is a folder where you can put devices where they have common settings, where you want common settings. So if you've got multiple applications, mainly it's going to be around the application package. So where you've got different application packages, you may want to use different folders or different groups. It may be you got MPC 306s, and lo and behold, I've got a group for my MPC 306. So you've got number 306s in there. You put them all in the same group, and then you can have a common setting there. So a device group effectively is a folder where you can apply common settings across a number of devices. To add a device, you click the Add Device. This hasn't changed before. You give it a name, and I'm going to pick a name out the hat here. My God, is that not original? I'll give it an IP address. I hope I've got that right. It's not one I use normally. You'll see here, it's also got the inherent properties for the group. So I'm actually going to do that as a false for now, primarily because I want to go through the settings. So we've got our username. So this is our admin account. Our password, it's default blank, so I'm leaving it blank. We select our device type. Now, remember, every multifunctional device other than a MPC 306 is classed as an MFP. Any supported printer device, and I stress the word supported because it has to be effectively an SOP G2 device printer, that will come under SFP, and that does have some features on there to help against the traditional issues we have with putting PCC on print type devices. Do we want to sign the home key as an application? Well, yes, I do. Do I want scan preview? Well, I suppose I better, because otherwise you end up with a big white hole where you think there should be something when you look at your scan setup. We can select our application package. So this currently is the PCC 5.1 current package. I'm not going to do custom assets effects. I'll open the things up just so you can see what I'll post it down before I say, because I'm going to cover this later. So custom assets. We now have two custom assets, and that is the application logo and the welcome screen logo. Now currently, and I'll come back to that, I've got a couple of logos which are there. I'm not really going to touch that. Under normal circumstances, you would have, your only choice would be default or none, because the files don't exist. The only way that it knows what file is for which area is by the size. If you hover over the information logo, you'll see it comes up and says for the application logo, it needs to be 288 pixels by 72 pixels. So you need to create an image which is 288 by, I can remember, 72. And likewise for the welcome screen, it needs to be 174 by 174 pixels. It only knows which picture is for which area based on the size, and that will be quite important. You'll see when I do that session that basically you can have as many images in that folder as you want. You'll only see two images. The other item is the custom welcome text screen. So you can put in here, and I already know I'm going to preempt this because I'm fairly sure I saw a question on this come in. You can have your own language. So you can, if you can type it in your own language, you can put it in your own language, and it will be displayed. The limitation is 60 characters. So if you can't write what you want within 60 characters, it will get truncated. The only issue is the interface allows you to put in many more than 60 characters. So that's one thing you need to be aware of. Workflow buttons, okay. So this is where you can load workflow buttons onto the screen. So it's easy to look at this. When I first looked at this, I thought they don't put the full applications on, but in fact, if you've got a scroll bar there, if you scroll down, you can see it. There's some which I can't show you today. Cloud apps, I will mention it. I'm not going to take it. I won't take any questions on it unless somebody else wants to. But Cloud Apps basically doesn't refer to SI Cloud. It actually refers to ICE, which is available in the integrated cloud environment, which is available as a US product only. We've got access for Global Scan and X. I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here because I'm telling you stuff that I was meant to save up for later on, but effectively you can install an icon for Global Scan and X. If it doesn't show up, which is what it didn't do for Neil earlier on, it's because Global Scan and X is not installed on that MFP, so it's intelligent enough to know that if Global Scan and X is not installed, it doesn't show it. I have got another device where it's installed, I can show it. So we've got full scanner, got quick fax, quick scanner, full fax, quick copy, and copy are all available. But I'm not going to select anything for now. And I'm just going to turn these off. And I'm going to save that device. Okay, and everything should be looking reasonably familiar to you all out there. Okay, it's not scary so far. So now we're going to sort of get to the point where I'm going to have to blend video with sort of live. That's with the install, and it's purely, as I say, to sort of save a bit of time. So first of all, just going through the install actions. Just to check with the install actions, we come up here. Oh, we now have quite a list of actions. I'm not going to go through them in order from top to bottom. I'm going to go through them in probably what I consider to be the order that you're most likely to use them in. So the first one is full install. So a full install is what it says. It does a full install. And that combines with an uninstall. So the first thing that happens when you do a full install is you'll see that it initiates an uninstall. Even if PCC5 is not installed, it will still initiate an uninstall. It will uninstall if there is any previous product there. It will uninstall it only if it's PCC5. And I say this because if you've got PCC4 on the device, it will not remove it using this. You will have to do that before you start installing PCC5. So full install, start off with an uninstall for any previous versions of PCC5.x. It will run through, it will install the product, it will apply the SP mode settings, apply the user mode settings, and then apply any of the customizations that you've actually introduced into the product. Install and reboot. Okay, this is much the same as what it was before under the previous DRS. So install and reboot does what it says on the tin. Installs it, restarts the machine. Doesn't do anything else. You come up with an unconfigured PCC screen. And then you would normally run a configure and reboot to apply your configuration to PCC so that it comes up and connects to the DC server, etc. Sync assets. Okay, we have the image assets. So rather than having to go back and do what you might consider to be a quick install, no, or full install, no, what you can do is once you've applied an image, if it wasn't part of the original full install package, you can just do a sync assets. This operation takes a couple of minutes on a device. So it just goes out, tells the device, I've got something for you. The device then comes in on that URL that I showed you earlier and grabs the updated assets. Likewise with sync workflow buttons. So if you've applied your copy button, quick copy button, fax, etc., but it wasn't part of the original full install, you can then do a sync workflow buttons to deploy those out. Reboot does what it says on the tin. Reboots the device. Full reboot. Uninstall does what it says. It will uninstall PCC and put all the settings back as they were. So with an uninstall, what you should find is once it's completed and completed successfully, the machine is back to the previous state and working. Okay, the three that are left over, quick install, get settings, set device, get device settings, set device settings. Now, you've recognised get device settings and set device settings from PCC5, from DRS 7.11 and lower. So this allowed you, if you wanted to see what settings, SP settings have been made on the machine, you could do get device settings. It will then download from the machine that information and stores it as a file within the directory structure. And if you want to apply or reapply device settings, you could do that by doing set device settings, and you'll go out and it would actually reapply the settings you should have set when you did the configure and reboot. And from my point of view, I don't know about everyone else out there in terms of their experience, but from my experience, if you were sending PCC5 out to a number of devices, I'd always find at least one or two, maybe more devices where it would do a configure and reboot, but when it came back, it obviously hadn't applied the right device settings, so then they'd have to do set device settings separately. And we could argue for long and hard as to why this happened, but so it was one of those things I used to find with PCC 5.0. I haven't had to use that with PCC 5.1, and that's quite interesting. It's worked generally with a full install. It's worked every time. Quick install. Now, okay. The thing about quick install is maybe it should have had a different name from my point of view, but that's the name it's got, and we have to work with it. Quick install is intended for when you're doing an upgrade. So if you get a bug fix, say bug fix, there are no bugs in PCC 5.1. What am I talking about? When you get an improved version of PCC 5.1, you can use quick install to actually install that on the device. Okay, you don't have to do a full install. But that is really the only time we could be expected to use a quick install, which is one of the reasons why I left it to last. It's first in the list, but it's actually probably the one you should be using the least in terms of the install options. Okay, so that looks at the screens. Just a couple of things up here. One is obviously you've got help about, tells you what modules you're running, same as before. You can see its overall module is DRS 7.12. I know that there's somebody looking over my shoulder who's going to be very keen on this, and that's to point out the logo in the top left-hand corner. On the previous version of DRS, it was black, and it's now being changed to use the standard white colour, so it matches better across the top bar. There's a little bit of a gotcha. Once again, I'm kind of spilling the beans on tomorrow. When you do a DRS upgrade, you can do it. One of the things you look for is whether or not that logo has gone to white. What you can actually find, though, is you get stuck by your browser, as I did. So if DRS had upgraded, I opened up, but the logo was still black. Everything seemed to be all right, but it was annoying me that the logo was still black. So I went back and did another upgrade, installation upgrade of DRS. Ended up at the same point. It wasn't until somebody reminded me you need to clear your browser cache out that I suddenly realised what was going on. So that's a bit of a gotcha for tomorrow. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do now is get a video on screen. Hope that's been okay so far. Obviously, I haven't been looking at the questions. Right, I see some come through. We'll get to those in a while. I'll just get through this first. And what I need to do. Just wait for VRC to pop up. And there we go. And what I'm going to do is let's go back here. I'm actually going to pause that Let me step forward a bit. The reason being is because I've taken you through all of this. So we're going to go through and we're going to start at exactly 8.37. So this is where we actually start the install on the device. So it's actually, it's not the same device, it's the same type of device. And you can see I'm very original with my naming. And what we can see first of all is uninstall the client application. Now for those of you who may have seen the video come up, you'd have noticed that total length of the video was a little over 13 minutes. So an install takes about 15 minutes on the device. On a 306 it could be a bit longer, but certainly on an up-to-date G2.1 device it's about 15 minutes. And you can run devices in parallel. There's no specific limit on the number of devices you can have in DRS, but you can only roll out to 10 devices in parallel. You'll notice we've gone, we jumped from uninstall to resetting, so that would have been one reboot, and this is where I've actually shortened the video. We've now got to a section where it's preparing device configuration. This is how far it's got. So at most of this time, to be honest with you, is spent waiting for the device to get back to from a rebooted position. You have to remember that OXOP currently, and this is one of the big changes that will happen, or it's got to happen in the future, is currently RxOP is a Java service. So in order to roll out PCC 5.1, PCC 5 to the device, in fact, you are going through a Java-based service. So every reboot you do, you have to wait for the Java VM to restart, and then for the application to start. So that adds a bit to the time. We now can see that it's switched to installing client application. I feel like I haven't spoken so much in months, not even to my wife. Next one is verifying device status. So this now indicates the application is installed. It's waiting for a reboot. In fact, the application is installed and configured because I had the machine next to me at the same time. The machine comes up, so it's just waiting for the channel to open so they can complete the verification. So now it knows that it's installed, so it's doing a setting device configuration. And this is actually quite handy, this bar. I actually like it because it gives you a bit more confidence. There we go, the big reboot. So now it's done a series of little reboots and panel reboots. It's now doing a full device recycle. So once again, we'll go back into verifying device status. So it's waiting for the application to come online. So the good point for me is from the angle that I work from. Okay, I'll stop blathering. There we go. We've got a full install and it's successfully completed. Okay. So what I'm going to do is switch over to the machine so you can actually see what it's done. So I should have done it before and after, and I apologise for that. But basically, you'll see that it would have gone from a completely uninstalled scenario where there was nothing. It was yesterday's news, by the way. To a fully installed scenario. So this is where we've now got everything that we need. Right. So there we go, remote panel operation. I don't know if people are aware that that was launched. You do need version 1.30 SOP firmware, panel firmware, and you also need the latest package file firmware and any update outside the package file as well to be applied. There's also a setting you have to do under the screen features mode from user tools to make sure that remote operations running. But, there you go. So anyway, so this has done a full install of PCC, and once we've logged in, we can see that we've got our buttons there. So that's that. And at that point, I'm going to stop the video. So that was a full install from start to finish. One thing I probably would like to know, and this is a slightly offbeat point, is whether or not having a video of the full install from end to end would be something that people would consider useful. I've done a couple of videos, but with no sound. And what I'll do is I'll go back and put sound in them, and forever my dulcet tones will be committed to video on YouTube. But it'd just be ideal to know whether or not having a full videos of the processes would be good. But that was a full install. Right. Do you want to take a couple minutes for it?
Yeah.
Carry on. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we'll carry on. I'm going to take a sip of water though, so if you wonder why there's nothing happening on your side, it's because I'm guzzling. Okay. So the next thing that I was going to show is around some of the new features around assets, custom assets. And I'm going to start this off. I'm going to do this live. It says, I go back here and I realised something I should have done earlier. I was just checking stuff earlier on. I'm going to, before I do anything else, I'm going to remove these assets from here. They're great, by the way. I'll apologise for them now. I haven't got the patience to deal with photo applications at the best of times, and certainly I didn't have any patience yesterday. So by default, you normally get to here, and if I go back to my devices, if I edit this device, so this is a 402 that we did earlier on, I come down here, and we go to custom assets. What we'll see is that by default, or what we should see is that by default, there's only default on one. So there's no images there. So in order to get that, go back to our files, we go to upload, anytime soon. We select our file, we go to our files images. I'm just going to add each one of these files out. I did try adding as a zip file earlier on. It adds a zip file, but it doesn't actually extract it. So unfortunately, you do have to add them one by one. And given the persons in the room that deals with this, I'd probably ask that to be an improvement feature from my side anyway. So I just add each one of these. The reason I'm adding all of these is because I just want to push home a point. So I've uploaded my image files. So I've uploaded a load. You can see that I've uploaded to 7 files. So now I go back to my devices. I'm going to pick on my trusty 402. I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to go to custom assets. And we've got our application logos, screen logo. If I click on the down arrow, you can see that we only have one file which meets the requirements to be the application logo. But I have 2 files in there for either which I could use for the welcome screen image, and that's purely because I created 2 the same size. But you'll notice that there's 4 files which are missing because they do not conform to the right standard. So if you start putting images in there wondering why you can't see them, it's because they're not the right size, or it believes they're not the right size. Okay, and we can save that. Now, coming back to my video, I'm going to do the rest of this on video once again, just really to make it just a bit quicker. It is actually quite a quick process, but probably need to start that again. So here we go. So this shows us uploading files. To be honest, I can probably skip past that a bit. So adding files. Okay, I've only added 3 files this time, so you can live with that. So I'll just show you got 3 files there. As if we go to our devices, once again, I select my device, 402, edit it, go down to custom assets. And the custom assets, I can select it to true, and then I can select my logos. I think I also make a bit of a mistake on this one, which would be quite handy. I left it in there because it's quite a handy one to see. So I've selected my 2 logos. The other one wasn't, there's a 3rd logo in there which wasn't actually applicable, didn't work. I save it. And then I go up, and because I've already done a full install, I don't really want to do another full install. I just want to sync the assets. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to select sync assets, and I'm going to tell it to go. And you'll see down the bottom it says this thing pooling, which is actually polling. So it's polling for configuration servlet. So this is going out to the machine to say, I've got something for you. And then what you should see is it switches to a different state where it's sending configuration, sending asset synchronization request. So this is now where it's where the device is syncing up. And in theory, this one should, I think, fails. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it because it's a video and I know I fixed it. But yeah, it's good. I thought it was good to leave it in there so you can see. So the 601 error, okay, fails. You're sitting there thinking, what have I done? Well, I suddenly realised I had TLS enabled. I hadn't updated the URI there. I suspect that may be a problem that comes up more than once. I don't know if Yang and Ava are on the phone, but that's probably one that they're going to get. So now when I do a sync assets, go through the same polling, sending asset synchronization requests, so it's now things are trying to communicate with each other. And this time around, it should actually say completed. Yes, okay. So return codes, by the way, they are in the documentation. Return code 0 is something that's issued. Just to show you there that I've now got my image assets, and they're both there. Not the best. I'm sure there's people out there that can do much better than me. But that just shows you that. Right, just just a little note there that I was going to come back to whilst I was in that video. Let's come here. Return code 0, okay, 601. So they're all in the manual. Now, return code 0 is generally everything's okay. However, you will find if you do a full install, so not full install, if you do an install and reboot, what you'll actually get come back is a return code 100. Okay, still means it's okay. What it's trying to tell you is you've got more work to do. So with an install and reboot, it will come back with a completed status, yes, a return code 100 to indicate that you've still got work to do. So that's just 601, 603s tend to be fairly sort of common. They're general communication errors. I'd say 601, as you saw there, was related to my settings around HTTPS. Okay, so what's next? We'll look at my next one. It's a very, very simple one. This is custom text. So I'm going to go back to my machine I've been using here in the live thing. I'm going to edit it and I'm going to go down. Custom text. Now, when I do the video, I'm going to make a mistake. When you actually start playing around with custom assets and custom text in the same kind of keystrokes, in the same session, is the wrong word, at the same time, you can have a little bit of an issue where you think you've set your application logo, and then go and change your custom screen text logo. You set that, and then when you actually deploy it, you suddenly find your images up there because in between you switching to different areas inside the screen, it's actually reset these back to default. So that's one thing just to watch out for. If need be, save it as soon as you've changed something, save it, and then edit it again. But anyway, customize custom text. So here we go, welcome stream text. So I can just go world. Not a very original one, very important, but not very original. And we can save that. Okay, and this time I can do another sync assets. And I've got a video for this as well, which is be pleased to know. Okay, I'm not even going to shorten this one, I'm just going to let it go as it is. So going down, we've got other images there, we did that from the last one. I'll select my custom text. Put in there my trusty phrase. Okay. Nothing else to do. Save it. And then we go through the process of delivering the asset. I feel like something out of Jason Hall, delivering the asset, syncing the assets. So here we go, polling again, and then we'll see it sending, and hopefully success. Sending the assets, so that will send all the assets again, so including any image assets got, plus the text, and it's come up and said it's okay, and hopefully the video I will break out once again to the screen, and we will see that the text has changed on the screen. So that's now. So I'm going to drop that off there. So that's we've now done configuring assets in terms of adding images, deploying images. We've done custom welcome text, and the last thing really I want to go through, and by now you probably spotted how to do it, you're already very happy, is look at the workflow button. So I'm going to do that. What I'm going to do was this. So I'm going to edit the same device again with 402. Go down and then customize workflow buttons, and we'll scroll down. And we can select which buttons we want. And so we need to be careful about the use of quick shortcuts and launcher screen. So At this point in time, we're only really going to do those two. Global Scanner X, yes, I could deploy that, but I know for a fact that this machine doesn't have Global Scanner X on it. And even if I was to deploy it, it would show on the front panel. I will put the scanner. Okay, and then we save that. And I'm going to say, guess which option we use now? Do we all say sync assets? And I'll say, wrong, we use sync workflow buttons instead. So, which is, to be honest with you, it's good that those two have been separated out, because there's going to be times when you're going to want to change the buttons. You don't necessarily want it to keep sending out the images and screen text. It's more likely the image and text of items that you're going to want to change all at the same time. So sync workflow buttons. But just so that I don't break the habit, you can see the picture build. The original one, I'm just going to start the video again. Once again, I'm not even going to speed this up, just go through it. I'm going to see it a second time. So select our customized workflow buttons. And scroll down. Select, first off, remember there's a scroll bar for additional items. Then we can select, remember Cloud Apps is for integrated cloud environment, which is a US marketing only product. I know that there's going to be questions on whether or not we can get it to work with SI Cloud. I guess that's something we'll look at in the future, but I'll have to say it's probably not a priority thing. Here we go, we can add our buttons. And I can change order, so I can say, well, okay, when it goes on the screen, is the scan next button to be the first one that comes up, whether it's on the left or right. Okay, I'm happy with that. And now I just go through my sync workflow. And once again, just tolling. So it's not having to send the whole configuration down again, we're only just updating the one part of the configuration we want to change. Okay, and successfully completed. And to be honest with you, it's pretty much, it's not much slower than that. I might have cut a few seconds of video out here. It's pretty much what it is. So if we log in now, we can see we have our buttons available. So scan, copy, fax, and scan. Global Scanner X is not there because it's not installed on this machine. So it's intelligent enough. So. Okay. So from my side today, that's as much as I was going to cover. Tomorrow, we will look at more mainly to do with DOS upgrades and the process of doing a DOS upgrade and PCC upgrade. So what I'll do for now is I'm going to pop back to the slide and have a look through, and I will just ask one of my colleagues if they want to switch to Q&A. Or do you want to finish off first? Do you want to do Q&A now?
We can do Q&A now to provide you answers to some of the questions that have been submitted through the chat. So from Fiona, we have the question, what will happen to eCopy, Save Command, Streamline Linux? This is outside the scope of this meeting. It will be discussed at a later date. However, as Benjamin answered, Streamline Linux, we have a native client with version 3.2. This is in the roadmap that Rico provided. Petri wrote that the main reason for using PCC4 is to allow clients to use the device basic function, such as copy, fax, use them freely without authentication. Authentication is only required from the follow you print and scan to me. Is this possible with PC 5.1? No, but you can use the guest button to allow a non-registered user to access the device function, such as copy. Trevor asked, will version 5.1 allow to be installed locally without the need of DRS being installed? Not officially. Support is only provided when DRS is used. Trevor also asked, can all character sets be used for screen customization? Well, if that means using other languages than English, yes, that will be possible. Rob asked, is it possible to change the color?
Hi Rob, this is Neil. I can answer that for you. That was outside of the scope of the customization that we offered at this moment in time, but this is a future potential feature enhancement that we're tracking. So maybe in the future.
And a welcome screen for each language?
I think we just mentioned that for Trevor's question. If that means that you can write your local language characters, then absolutely, yes, you can.
Is the date and time of print job visible?
That's still a feature enhancement. We weren't able to get to that within this release, so that again will be considered for a future version of the product.
Is it possible to see the price cost of each job from Follow You?
We probably need to look into that. I believe that you can, but we'll verify and get back to you tomorrow on that.
Can Capture and Send now create non-existing folders at the first scan?
I'm not sure on that one. We may need to converse with Vince on that one. So we'll get back to you tomorrow on that.
Can ScanTom free scanning settings be derived by Equitrack server or at the default device setting?
I don't understand that question.
Which version of full copy is available? Only SOP 1 or the classical one?
It's SOP and quick copy.
Which version of full copy is available? One is the same. Is the widescreen and cannot connect to workflow error fixed?
The widescreen error still is under investigation between Nuance and Rico. We'll look to fix that in a future version of the product. I'm not sure what you mean by connect to workflow error fixed. We may need to look into that and get back to you.
And tomorrow's session will focus on known issues and the way on how to work around them. Can we now add a button to native classic scan so that we can use features like batch split on page?
From my perspective, it's quick scan or full scan. I'm not familiar with classic scan, but I guess if it's the same as classic copy, then the answer is no.
307 uses smart scan? No.
Simple scan.
Simple scan. Thank you, Vince. Will there be a proper alert pop-up for the user when the paper ends during a released print job?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. And so regarding the pop-up when user is out of paper, again, really good question. We've seen this as a feature enhancement. We are investigating with Rico Japan how we can potentially utilize that functionality into our user notifications. But at the moment, the user notifications is only using messages coming from the Nuance application. But this is continuing to be investigated.
So should we go back? Somebody say, was it 306? 307.
307.
307 uses smart scan.
So it's yes. For 307, it does use smart scan.
And the thing is, the drop-down list for the device type, we've got MFP, NPC 306, 406, or SFP. So anything other than an NPC 306, 406, and an SFP will be in MFP, which uses smart scan.
Another question from Trevor. Why is database update tool not built into the installer?
Thanks, Trevor, for that one. That's quite a contentious question, actually. Unfortunately, and this is not something that I wish to necessarily talk about from a Rico perspective, but DRS is not just used for Rico devices. So there is other elements that come into play here.
Does PCC 5.1 support installation on IPsec infrastructure from Jan Togo? Can you help me with that one? Sorry. Does PCC 5.1 support installation on IPsec infrastructure?
Okay, that's actually not a big point. It's a bit of a point. In theory, yes, it should do because its IPsec should be invisible to the layer which it's operating. However, given that you've got TLS there, most IPsec has an overhead, both in terms of setting it up, maintaining the policies, and also in terms of the actual network speed as well. It has a bit of an overhead on the network. If the solution's already got TLS involved, TLS is pretty much used across the board now for securing HTTP traffic. I would expect people probably more towards to default more towards using a TLS. One of the only reasons I know that IPsec was generally used or generally recommended is because we didn't have another way. We now have another way.
Next question from Rob. What about eCopy?
If this question is, can you put an eCopy button on the screen of the Nuance launcher or the welcome screen, then the answer is no. Even though eCopy can be run on Java, you would have to drop out to the Rico home screen to be able to access it.
Thank you. Another question, external web-based apps. Currently, as Vince mentioned, it's ICE.
So I can take that one. And Rob, I think this also goes to your question on Paper River. Currently, we're only able to utilize the native device functions or extended device apps that's called for within the Rico platform. As more APIs become available to access additional features, we can certainly look to add them into the Nuance application. But at the moment, it's only the native device apps, Global Scan, and the Rico Cloud apps, which is ICE for the Americas.
Is eCopy actually on the roadmap?
Rico Finland asks, does DRS still use various selecting of upper ports during installation and configuration? Does DRS still use various selecting of upper ports during installation and configuration?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
So I was just talking. I think somebody tried to come off voice, I think it might have been Rob anyway. So I thought I heard somebody ask a question about a roadmap.
Will there be the ability to show print date time on the follow document list? Well, we answered this one.
I believe it does, but we'll double check that and verify tomorrow.
Sven, hiding functions which are not available on the machine, like fax, with no fax option installed, not working now. Could this be a future addition?
Certainly, potentially. I'm not sure if the platform allows us to interrogate the Rico device. Maybe it does, but it certainly wasn't available to us at the time. But that's something that we'll continue to discuss with Rico Japan.
And another question, account charge summary is working neither at the beginning nor at the end of a session. Or have I done something wrong?
Session summary screen. Yes, unfortunately, session summary screen has been deleted. There was many technical problems with the session summary screen, so that was deleted back in the previous build. I think it was the 5.2.5 build, and there is no plans to bring that functionality back.
Okay, thank you. The next question from Sven is a little bit long and technical, so perhaps we skip it. Sorry. How does customized workflow buttons correlated with Equitrack quick shortcuts buttons?
That's a really good question, and both of them still exist. So you can now manage quick shortcuts through DRS, and you can also manage quick shortcuts through System Manager and Equitrack. The reason being is we weren't able to take all of the settings out of System Manager without making some edge cases. So the best thing to do is to try to blend the installation to use the functionality that you require out of System Manager or DRS. And please pay attention that you don't get yourself into a loop where you may be doing duplicate workflow icons.
From Adam, was there mention at the beginning of a session that said you can only embed one at a time, each device taking up to 15 minutes?
You can embed one at a time, but the beauty of DRS is that you can queue up as many devices as you so desire. I think Vince mentioned in the session that we can do 10 in parallel, and then it will do the next 10 and the next 10 and the next 10. And we've been told of instances where over 100 devices have been queued up in one go. And I think that's where DRS really comes into its own, that allows you to have that flexibility to be able to deploy to a large fleet.
Another one from Adam. How do billing codes work with a new interface?
The same as they did before. So you have billing codes at log on if you want to control for copy jobs. In addition, you can also set billing codes at print time.
Same question we had with eCopy about SafeCom. It will be mentioned later on. Please, could you create a document with question and answers? Not all answers. Yes, we will try to do that. Thank you. So there's another question. When updating firmware from SD card on a PCC5 device, PCC keeps focus and never see the end of an update. Is it fixed?
That's interesting because, to be honest with you, when I update, okay, from my point of view, when I finish the install, the whole thing gets handed over to support, so I don't see this problem. But I know in our lab, when I do the updates, what I tend to do on the machine is I tend to turn off the authentication for PCC so that PCC is still there, but I can actually use the machine and I update that way. I think I know what he's saying is that when you update, when you put the SD card in, so yeah.
It's still the same because I guess PCC has focus. You need to disable PCC if you want to do a device update.
Yeah, it's still there, Vince.
Yeah. When you say what to document, do you mean just document that last point or document all the Q&A? Last point. Okay, thank you.
Okay, this seems to be the last question. Thank you. Please remember that's the next session tomorrow, the follow-up on this one, where we will show you how to update the PCC from 5.0 to 5.1 and address the known issues. This session will take place at 11 a.m. Central European Time and 10 a.m. in UK. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Sure. Well done, guys.
Well done, Rich. You did a lot
Yeah.
of it.
Should have dropped you. Should have got you more water and like cakes and
I
sweets.
didn't realise because you've got the air conditioning.
Yeah,
It starts to dry your throat.
it does.
Whereas the